All right, everybody. I am making my first video in a long time. And I'm going to respond to a couple of things. First, I want to respond to the people out there who've been basically ragging on J.K. Rowling because of her new book. First and foremost, all I can say is stop it. Just stop it. One of the things that I really hate, and I mean this, really hate about this, is people like, oh, J.K. Rowling's a transphobe, J.K. Rowling's a transphobe. No, she's not. She is literally saying that gender identity is perfectly valid, but it doesn't invalidate the existence of biological sex. That is literally all she has said. Then people got up in arms. Oh, her book has a character who's trans, who's murdering people. No. Her book has somebody who is literally using women's clothing as a disguise, so this way they can get away with murder. That is not somebody who has a trans identity. That is not somebody who is presenting as trans. This isn't even a transvestite. This is literally somebody who is straight up using women's clothes as a disguise. It's basically dressing in drag for the dumbest possible reason. But at the same time, the character is not trans. The character is not being treated as a representation of trans people. The character is literally a serial killer, a psychopath, who has decided to use women's clothing as a disguise, at least from what I've been led to understand about this book. Now, Piers Morgan of Good Morning Britain, whatever, has said that he has read a review of the book written by somebody who has read it, who has flat out stated there is nothing, quote-unquote, transphobic about it. So why is everybody saying that J.K. Rowling is a transphobe? Because she does not say biological sex doesn't exist. Because science has proven it does exist. Whether or not you like that, I don't care. Does this mean that I have anything against trans people? No. Does this mean that I think J.K. Rowling has anything against trans people? No, absolutely not. I honestly think what this means is she came up with the idea for a character, for the main character of her book series to have to deal with in what is effectively a murder mystery. It's something we haven't seen in a while, I think maybe at all, in the last 20, 30 years. But people get up in arms about it because, oh, person's wearing women's clothing. Who cares? All right? Again, this isn't somebody who's trans. This isn't somebody who is, again, even a transvestite. They're not a cross-dresser. They're literally using it as a disguise. Get this through your heads, people. Biological sex is real. Gender identity is real. The two are not mutually exclusive to the point that one cancels out the other. You can be born biologically male, but be a trans woman who feels that she's in the wrong body. There is literally nothing that says the two things cannot be true at the same time, and this is where I get really pissed off at people. Stop throwing around labels. Stop being divisive. In short, stop being an asshole. All right? Now, one thing I do want to bring up. I used to follow Dominic Noble. He put out a video in the last couple of days called, I'm not even sure what the video was called, but the book he reviewed was called Dreadnought. And one of the first things he does, he takes a shot at J.K. Rowling. This, I mean, again, I don't personally agree with his views on J.K. Rowling because I think he is far too quick to throw around labels. I think he's far too quick to go around with mob rule and mob mentality. This disgusts me. Still, I'm willing to respect his opinion within reason. However, then we get into the review, and he puts up this thing where he wants to say, oh, well, this person is a TERF, I believe the phrase stands for trans exclusionary radical feminist. And he then suggests that this person should be shunned because they, don't believe trans women are women. I'm not sure what the hell a TERF is actually supposed to be. I just heard that's the general implication from what I've heard with the term being thrown around. I don't know. I don't care. Either way, the review itself is otherwise fine. I'm just going to say this. When you try to sell somebody on a book, identity politics really shouldn't be something you're trying to sell the book on, because it doesn't work. I personally don't care about a person's, personal identity in the sense that it's their identity. I'm not going to complain about it. I'm not going to bitch about it. It's their identity, but I don't want to hear about it. All right? If they're trans, hey, great. That's perfectly fine for them. If they want to tell me they're trans, again, that's fine. But most of the time when I'm hearing about people being trans is I hear about people going, oh, look at how transphobic the world is. Well, yeah, some people probably are. Or at the very least, I don't know if they're afraid of trans people so much as they just don't like it to the point of irrational hatred. That's not really fear. That's, again, an irrational hatred. Either way, when you say that somebody should be shunned simply because they don't agree with certain views on trans people, that's like, okay, so you think the best way to change hearts and minds is to shun people and give them a reason to be resentful? Yeah, I'm sorry, Dominic, but that is the dumbest fucking thing I've heard in the last couple of days. It really is. I'm sorry. When you, first off, say, well, we should be inclusive of everybody, but then say we should shun people instead of either trying to change their minds, in a way that's not going to just drive them way further, of course, but instead of trying to get people to see things differently, you want to shun them? Are you trying to create more division in the world? Because it sounds legitimately like that's what you're trying to do. It really sounds like you want the world to just shun people who don't think the way you think. That's a bad idea. All right? Then, in the same, and this is something else that gets me, in the same video, Dominic basically made it sound like he was okay with the author of the book Dreadnought acting like an asshole to ICE agents simply for doing their job. Now, he might not have actually meant this, but this is how it came off as. And for somebody who is saying we need to be more inclusive of people, to A, say that it's okay to act like an asshole to people for doing their jobs, and B, that we should shun people for not thinking the way he thinks, I'm sorry, that just disgusts me. It's a stupid idea. It's a stupid mentality, and it doesn't help anybody. I am reminded, I wish I knew the guy's name, but there is an individual that I heard about a couple of years ago, and I'm not talking about the guy who was the centerpiece of the movie Black Klansman, I don't think. It could be him, actually. But there was an individual who was able to change the minds of people who were part of the KKK by simply talking to them. Treating them like people, treating them with respect. In short, treating them the way he wanted to be treated. And he got them to realize that the racist bullshit that the Klan was feeding them was, in fact, garbage. And it astounds me to think that, okay, well, somebody who claims to be a feminist who doesn't accept trans people should be shunned. It's like, no. You know what you do? You either, try to change their minds in a rational and respectful way, or you simply acknowledge they're never going to see the world the way you see it, learn to live with it, and if you treat them respectfully, they may never get over the fact that you're trans. They may never accept, trans women as women or trans men as men. But at the very least, they'll come to respect you as a person, hopefully, if they're not a complete asshole. But I'm sorry, this idea that you need to shun people who don't think the way you do, that is dumb. All right? If somebody doesn't agree with you on something, either you agree to disagree. I mean, as long as they're not out advocating for violence. I'm not saying, go out there, and be respectful of people who are actively engaging in violent white supremacist actions. I am not suggesting that. I myself am mixed race despite what my skin color looks like. My father's side of the family is ethnically Hebrew. My mother's side of the family pulls in heritage from all over Europe and a little bit of the Mediterranean. I have never understood the concept of why people think that skin color matters. So somebody has black skin. So what? So somebody has brown skin. So what? So somebody has Asian colored skin. Well, it's not really a color, but you get what I mean. Again, so fucking what? The color of their skin means less to me than who they are as a person. And I'm sorry, their skin color is going to be the least important component of who they are as a person. This, again, brings me back to two things. First, the world-famous I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr., where he asked people not to look at a person's skin and judge them based on that, or even interact with them based on that, but to look at who they are as a person, to see past the skin and just realize this is just another person, like you or anybody else. And in the intervening, almost 50 years, we have done the exact opposite of what he's asked us to do. He literally called for colorblindness from everything I can understand about that key phrase. Judge not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. To me, whether you are black, Asian, Latino, whatever, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is who you are as a person and what you do with your life. All right? You could be white as a ghost, and I wouldn't care at all about that. If you happen to be white as a ghost and you're out there and you're freaking beating on somebody for something as stupid as their skin color, I'm going to call you an asshole. I'm going to treat you like an asshole. If you are a black person, I'm not going to treat you like a criminal just because you're black. I'm going to look at what you do. If you're somebody who goes out there and enjoys a good movie, enjoys interacting with anybody regardless of their skin color and doesn't make everything about his skin, you're a good person. All right? Because you realize what everybody should have realized a long time ago. Skin color means shit. This is one planet. We're all one fucking people. I mean, again, I hate to say this, but anybody who literally looks at somebody and says you have to treat them differently because of their skin, whether it's treated differently in a positive manner or a negative manner, you're a fucking racist. If you treat somebody differently based on their sex or gender, because again, this is where I get into that whole issue, you're a sexist. And yes, you can be sexist towards men. I know people are going to say, oh, how dare he? That just makes him a sexist. No. If you literally judge somebody based on their sex or their gender, and I have a hard time equating sexuality with gender because gender is a social construct. Sex is a biological scientific fact. But in any case, if you judge somebody based on whether they're male or female, you are a sexist. If you judge somebody based on the color of their skin, regardless of what color that skin is, you are a racist. If you judge somebody based on whether they're trans or not, you're either a transphobe or a heterophobe or cisphobe, whatever the term would be. And that's simply life. And that's something you need to stop, look yourself in the mirror, and question your life values. Again, I don't remember who was interviewing him at the time, but Morgan Freeman said that he believed the idea of Black History Month was ridiculous. And he was asked why. And he said, quite sensibly, you're going to reduce my people's history to a month? Black history is American history. He's right. And when he was asked, when the interviewer, kept pressing him on this, he goes, oh yeah? When's White History Month? And the guy, I really wish I knew who the guy was off the top of my head. He said, well, I'm Jewish. And he responded, okay, when's Jewish History Month? There isn't one. Oh, do you want one? No. He gets it. He also says in the same interview, when asked, how are we going to stop, racism? Stop talking about it. He literally pointed this out to you. He literally took Dr. King's words and simplified them, which is pretty amazing because I'm pretty sure Dr. King's words were pretty goddamn easy to understand in the first place. He said, I'm not going to look at you as a white man, and I don't want you to look at me as a black man. I'm going to know you, and I'm going to treat you as whatever the guy's name was, and I want you to treat me as Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman has nothing to do with being black. Morgan Freeman has everything to do with who he is as a person. He said this outright. And again, here's another, and this is a little bit of truth bomb I'm going to drop on you. I hate the terms Asian American, African American, Hispanic American, Latino American. You know why? You're all American. All right? Who your ancestors were, yes, matters to your personal history. But if you were born in this country, regardless of your ethnicity, you are American. Now, if you're an immigrant, first generation, yes, then you are a quote-unquote African American, or Hispanic American, or Latino American, or Asian American. Otherwise, you're just American. All right? And this is something I hate in modern media. We treat everybody as if their frickin' ethnicity, their skin color, their sexuality, their personal identity somehow matters more than who they are as a person. Who they are, for example, in Hollywood right now, they've got this shit going on with the Oscars where you have to have like such and such of a quota of people of, X race or X sexuality or whatever to qualify for Best Picture. You know what? Most people don't care about the Academy Awards anymore, let alone Best Picture. You know why? All the films that typically get nominated for Best Picture are films that typically most people don't even know. For example, I'd vaguely heard of La La Land. I'd seen an advertisement for it like once, maybe twice, the entirety of the time it had a theatrical run. The movie Moonlight ultimately won Best Picture. I'd never heard of it. I'd never seen it advertised. I'd never seen any kind of, commercial for it, never seen a magazine advertisement, nothing. I'd never seen it advertised on YouTube. I'd never seen it anywhere. This is prototypical of the modern Academy Awards. I don't know what the hell most of the movies that win Best Picture are. More to the point, I typically don't care. I only ever gave a damn about the Oscars once. And that was literally during the year that they had that big kerfuffle over The Wrestler. Because, yeah, I thought that was a great movie. It was probably the only, I don't even know if it qualifies as an indie film, but it was the only film that I would have considered an indie film at the time that I had any interest in. I'm a wrestling fan myself. I've briefly been in the business. And I would have loved to have seen it, take home some kind of an award, because that would have been an acknowledgement, not necessarily of the movie, but of the subject matter. Because, and again, I'm going to blow you away here. Professional wrestling is and has always been one of the greatest common denominators of enjoyment for people the world over. Regardless of skin color, ethnicity, sexuality, or personal gender identity, millions upon millions of people of all stripes and walks of life love professional wrestling. It is something that brings people together. And the Academy Awards snubbed it. Initially, they wouldn't even acknowledge, I believe it was Mickey O'Rourke and was it Marissa Tomei, I believe, was the female lead? Not Mickey O'Rourke, but Mickey Rourke, I apologize. I mean, for God's sakes, they were going to do a tie-in with fucking WrestleMania. Ultimately they decided not to, but, whatever. I mean, that was the filmmaker's choice. But either way, this was a great film. It was about a subject matter that really, hit close to home for me. Not because, I identify as a wrestler. Although, again, I did have a brief time in the business as a referee. I was training to be a wrestler. Nothing ever came of it. But I have an enjoyment of professional wrestling that I share with everybody who watches professional wrestling. And it doesn't matter to me what color they are, what they identify as, or where in the world they come from. As long as you aren't a raging racist, as long as you don't have a hatred of people for their fucking skin, for their ethnicity, whatever you want to identify that as or classify that as long as you have no problem with anybody regardless of their sexuality, their sex, gender, you're a person to me. Otherwise, you're just an asshole. And not necessarily an irredeemable asshole. You might be an irredeemable asshole, but I like to believe that there's a spark of goodness in just about everybody. I mean, except the Nazis. They were just fucking assholes. It's just one of those things that drives me nuts. And yes, I realize this is a rambling video. I don't give a shit. Okay? I really don't. This is something that's been bugging me for the last, basically, couple of years. We call it identity politics. We call it being woke. We call it social justice warriors. And these are all accurate labels. We have, in the last basically 10, 15 years, turned into idiots. The 1980s and the 1990s weren't the greatest time to be alive if you were gay. They were probably less well off for you if you were trans. But as we transitioned into the early 2000s, from my perspective, things started to get better. Then, right around 2012 to 2015, the world started going insane. And I think social media was a good part of it. We started seeing the fringe lunatics, the real wackos, come out and start basically running their mouths and just doing whatever the hell they wanted. And unfortunately, they were loud enough and stupid enough that people listened. And as a result, we have had people throwing around labels instead of talking to each other. We have had people, instead of doing what Dr. King asked, do the exact opposite in greater and greater regularity and more alarmingly so. We have people on both sides of the political spectrum causing God only knows what kind of damage and loss of life and just division. I have been a lifelong Democrat my entire voting life until 2019. I voted Democrat because they felt like they were more aligned to my personal beliefs. All right? There were some things I disagree with the majority on. I'm pro-life, but I'm all for a reasonable, and I stress reasonable, amount of, gun safety control laws. I don't think that's an unreasonable point of view. I do believe that, upending the Second Amendment altogether is a bad idea. That's literally taking away a person's ability to have something that to defend themselves with is a bad idea. And I will point this out. Every instance of an authoritarian or totalitarian or indeed, yes, fascist, and I view fascism as a logical extension of communism, one of the first things they did was to, by and large, disarm their population. Because the minute you disarm the population, you then leave them in a position where they can't defend themselves if you decide to go full Nazi. Never go full Nazi. Never go full communist. You cannot tell people that you're for the people if all you want to do is to dominate the people. People need to be able to defend themselves from you. If you are out there and you're a psychopath and you want to kill people, they need to be able to defend themselves. Now, by the way, here's something that people forget. Bearing arms doesn't just mean guns. It means weapons, arms. When we think of the word armed or arms, we generally do think of guns these days. Guns are typically referred to by the term firearms. I get it. People have made that very foolish mistake. But no, the right to keep and bear arms means the right to keep and have weapons of any type. You cannot abrogate that right. It is not something the government is allowed to take from you. Now, does this mean you need to have a certain amount of, safety protocols in place? Sure. I'm fully all for that. Now, a psychopath, I don't believe should have a weapon. But the average everyday American, it's in the Constitution. They're allowed to keep and use weaponry. I see what's going on in the world. Like that couple in, St. Louis? The McClowskis? They were charged for defending themselves. That's disgusting. We see this in the real world. We see this in politics. We see this in our media. And it disgusts me. We treat people as less than human because of the dumbest things. It needs to stop. Yes, I realize this is a rambly video. Yes, I realize I've been staring out the window while I've been saying this entire goddamn time. I don't care. All right? And I realize most of you have probably tuned out by now. For those of you who are still here, thank you. I guess in summation, too late, I know. To make a very long story short, I'm going to pull a line from fiction. Be excellent to each other. How hard is that? That we have to literally look at somebody and say, they must be bad because they think X. Well, if they think X, help them change to think differently. But don't just write them off. A lot of the reasons why people go down the wrong path, because when they start down that wrong path, it's because somebody who's already been led astray is doing the same to them. Some of these people are calcified in their beliefs, but there are so many more who aren't. And even if you never agree completely on things, that's no reason to give up on people. If you're going to give up on people, well, then that's because the first person you gave up on was yourself. That's just sad to me. Yes, this is rambly. I have no idea how to edit it, and I'm really not going to worry about it. I was never a tech-savvy guy. These are just my thoughts. And, do with them what you will. I mean, agree, disagree. Let me know in the comments. I mean, my comments are open. I mean, unless you're going on a racist tirade or a sexist tirade or heterophobic tirade or a transphobic tirade or a homophobic tirade or whatever kind of phobic you want to claim tirade. I may not respond to everything. I'll at least try to read it all. Maybe I'll even do a video responding to some of it. Although, I'll be honest, considering how rarely I use YouTube, I guess don't hold your breath. But just my 15 cents. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that.